All right, welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, going to break down this 3-game slate for DraftKings. It is a bit of a different slate just because we have the Bucks and Pacers tipping off at 4:30 p.m. Central. It is a nice 3-game slate, but it's kind of 2 different slates in a very real way because we have to prepare for this thing very, very early. And if there's any crazy news that comes out, we could be at a disadvantage if we're stacking the first game. That said, it is the playoffs, and I think the only real news would be, if Chris Middleton, who's questionable, if he randomly doesn't play. I don't envision that happening. And then Kawhi. Kawhi Leonard is questionable. If he doesn't play, obviously that would open up a lot of value and make James Harden and Paul George pop quite a bit. For the Clippers, that really is probably it as far as meaningful injuries. I guess there is Grayson Allen, too, for the Suns. He's questionable. And then Daniel Gafford is questionable too. Actually, Tim Hardaway is also out, so I lied. There's actually a decent amount to at least keep tabs on, and Kyle Anderson from Minnesota is questionable. I don't think at a high level that really impacts that much, but I'll talk about all of that as we go through each game. To get started here, this video is sponsored by DFS Hero. If you're in search for a cool lineup optimizer and need some features to help you get a takedown, you can try out DFS Hero. I'll be using their projections for this video. You can get a 15% off discount if you use our link in the video description below. And if I do help you out here today, please give this video a like and consider subscribing to the channel. It helps me know that I'm doing something right and that everything I'm saying and doing in these videos actually helps you out a little bit. Also, feel free to drop in the comments for questions anytime leading up in the lineup lock. I'm not always around before lock, but I will try to answer any questions that are put there. And also, if we do help you beyond the likes and subscribes, let us know. Let us know if you got a big takedown, and let us know how you did. Even just cashing is worth mentioning in DFS, especially when it's this volatile. We do aim to put out an MLB video every day we can, and there is hope that we'll be able to get one out today too. So if you like MLB, or you're trying to, thinking about giving it a shot, tune in later today, so hopefully we'll get that up for you. All right, let's dive right into it. We got Bucks and Pacers first. Bucks are 6-point underdogs at Indiana, and this game has a 223.5 total, by far the highest total of the night. All these games have pretty tight spreads, so I don't really see a major risk for blowout. But yeah, the Bucks let the last game in Game 2 get away. That series is tied at 1-1. So I don't really anticipate like a housing or anything. Obviously, Giannis is doubtful. He's still very unlikely to play. Probably not going to play in this entire series. It is what it is. The Bucks might be totally fucked. But for now, for DFS purposes, this is a good thing. Because Damian Lillard looks awesome. He's been really, really good in the first 2 games, putting up 48 and 51 fantasy points, 35 and 34 real points. It'd be great if his teammates can help him out a little bit, because then his assist numbers would go up a little bit of pressure would be taken off of him, and he could maybe score even better. But you just know this is the best DFS environment of the slate. The Pacers are going to push the pace. They still don't defend very well, even though it's the playoffs. So Damian Lillard's coming in with almost a 50-point fantasy projection and 25% boom rating at DFS Hero. That tells us that he is a good play at 9.3K. He's still not expensive enough. He is capable of getting 60 fantasy points in this setting. And he's coming in at 14% ownership. A major reason for that is because there's some pretty good options like right below his price range or significantly below. And also Luka Doncic is on this slate. So I understand the want to play Luka because he's got by far the best projection in the slate and just a crazy ceiling. If he nukes and you don't have him, you're in trouble. So if you're playing a lot of lineups, you definitely want some Luka. But Dame at 14% in like a pretty big game. I'm gonna side with Dame here. He's my favorite stud of the slate, and I don't see how that's a hot take. I don't really understand why the Luka ownership is just crazy right now. We'll get to that in a little bit. Long story short, love Dame. Love him even more if he's going to be this low owned. Chris Middleton, if he plays at 7.4K, pretty good play. He's pushing for 40 points for a fantasy projection, decent 20% boom rating. He's got a significantly better matchup because Pacers struggle against forward and they give up a lot of action inside, so he can get to his mid-range shots at will, and he'll probably be able to get to the basket basket a little bit too. He's carrying more ownership than Dame, but only 20%, so not egregious. So I like the Bucks here. Both Bucks stars stand out here. Bobby Portis is right there with him at 6.9K. His price is not elevated enough yet for the role he has. Projection's decent. Once again, he can get inside. He can shoot threes. So yeah, all three of these guys look really, really good. The game stack for this game in general looks awesome. Love Pat Bev at 4.7 as a value play. And Brook Lopez at 5.4 is totally viable. Only played 29 minutes last time in game 2. And, Brook he doesn't really do a lot. He can come out and have a block party every now and then, but that really hasn't been happening so far in the playoffs. He does not rebound very well. I mean, 1 rebound in 29 minutes is disgusting. He could wreck in this matchup. They do not do well in the paint, the Pacers, defensively. So I like him for his price point. I like him just fine. He's just not necessarily like a lock for me. I do like that he's not very owned. But how many bucks can you really play? I mean, what are you going to do? Stack up $5 here? I don't think that's really a viable option. But I would start it off with Dame, and I really like everybody here. But Bev would probably be my second favorite just because you need some salary savers, whether you're going to pay for Luka or not. So I like Bev quite a bit. And then I would probably go Bobby as my third favorite play here, then Chris, then Brook. It isn't to say Brook is a bad play at all. I just don't really love his ceiling and what he's shown so far in this series. That probably does it. I don't really like any other value plays for the Bucks. I mean, obviously, if Chris misses, then you can start looking at Malik Beasley if he comes back in the lineup starting lineup at 3.9K, Pat Connaughton at 3.5, Jay Crowder at 3.3. If one of those guys ends up starting, if Chris were to miss, sure, you can go with them, and they would probably be a bit of a priority just because they save so much cash. Over on the Pacers side, Tyrese Haliburton's pushing for a 50-point fantasy projection. He has not exhibited that ceiling so far in the series. He's kind of deferred to Pascal Siakam so far. That obviously could change. As we know, we cannot judge any individual play based off of what they've only shown us in the playoffs so far. I mean, one or two games here. Now 2 games for everybody, but 2 games does not tell us the complete story. Haliburton's just deferred, and Siakam's been wrecking. Could that be what continues? Absolutely. The Bucks have not had much of an answer for Siakam. He's been super efficient. Haliburton just naturally is a guy who sets his teammates up and just kind of goes with the flow of the game. That being said, this is game 3. It is shifting to Indiana. Haliburton may want to put on a show for the home crowd. He's not very expensive at 8.6. He projects very well, has a 35% boom rating at DFS Hero. That's the best boom rating for the Pacers. So he's absolutely a good play, but he's like 25% owned. He's going to probably push to be almost double the ownership of Dame. I would much rather just pay up for Dame and, be a little bit more underweight on Haliburton. But obviously it's a great game overall. So pairing them together is obviously very much in play. So I like Haliburton a lot. If I'm picking between him and Dame, I'm going to go Dame, though. Siakam, again, looks good. His price has come up by $500. He was a far better play in games 1 and 2 when his price was well below 8K, and he's smashed in both games. Even though the price has come up, he's going to push for 50 fantasy points if the Bucks keep letting him do what he wants. He's going to be chalkier than Haliburton. So of the two, I actually do prefer Haliburton just because – there's a lot of different options on the slate. I don't think we have to go eat Siakam chalk and bank on him being a monster 3 games in a row. That said, very good play. Still probably a little bit too cheap. My favorite Pacers play is Miles Turner. The Bucks have not really limited him so far in this series. Let's just double check how he's done. Yeah, 35 fantasy points in game 1, 47 fantasy points in game 2. So they're not really stopping him. He can hit the 3. He can block shots. He can rebound. He is a double-double threat. He can do a little bit of everything. He is too cheap. He's coming in with a 32% boom rating, pushing for 40-point fantasy projection. And it's just not a bad spot for him. I think he's just the best points per dollar option on this team right now. And he does do a lot when he's out there. So at 6.5K, he's one of my core plays for the slate. I also do really like Aaron Nesmith at 5.1 just because he's going to play a lot of minutes. Let me just double check his minutes for the first 2 games, 37 36, and he had 30 fantasy points in game 2. So, I mean, Nesmith is pretty scoring dependent, but he remains really cheap, and he's going to give you 35-plus minutes. That's good enough for me. Obviously, that philosophy did not work out very well yesterday. I said that about Rui Hachimura and somebody else, I can't remember, really got me 9 fantasy points. So that blew up in my face. But, it is what it is. It's the best game environment of the slate, and Neesmith is cheap, so I'm probably going to play him. All right, next up, we got Clippers and Mavs in Dallas. Dallas stole game 2. Series is tied 1-1. We don't know for sure if Kawhi Leonard's going to be back. He did return in game 2. Let me just double check what his minutes were at. 35 minutes in his first game back since March 31st. A little surprising. He wasn't very, very good for fantasy, only 36 fantasy points. But obviously, if he plays at 7.8K, Kawhi Leonard is definitely in play because there's not much of a minutes restriction there, if at all. I mean, all these guys, the Clippers guys, look fine. Dallas is a pretty good matchup. Harden at 8K, Paul George at 7.9, and obviously Kawhi. Pick your poison. One of them will probably go off. All three will probably be just fine. It's just up to you to decide who it's going to be. If Kawhi is out, both Harden and PG-13 look awesome. They're too cheap. If Kawhi is in, they just all look okay. They're just all fine. I don't have a problem getting any of them. If you want to lean on DFS Hero a little bit here, Harden comes in with the best projection. He comes in at just 10% ownership. And he comes in with the best boom rating at 21% of the Clippers today. So Harden will probably be my play here, especially since they're all basically the same price. But you can't go wrong with any of them, I don't think. My favorite Clippers play, though, is probably just going to be Zubac. He comes in with a 30-point fantasy projection, not very owned. I mean, center is just loaded with like a bunch of good players, like just decent guys. Rudy Gobert is the highest priced center at 7.2K. And he does have the best projection, but like all the guys just right below him and a little bit further, they all project pretty well, and they're all pretty good prices, and Zubac is one of them. He has eaten Dallas alive in this series so far. Let me just double check here. Yeah, 45 fantasy points in game 1, 30 fantasy points in game 2. He's always a double-double threat. He can get blocks, and he's playing 33 minutes per game in this series so far. So they just don't really have an answer for him. He's doing what he wants down low, and while he's not like a top priority for the Clippers offensively, he can still get easy buckets and all these ancillary stats that make him a good DFS play. So I like him quite a bit. He'd be the first Clipper I would look at. As far as other Clippers, I guess Russ at 5K would be an okay play. And then let's just check the minutes for these guys. Yeah, Terrence Mann, probably not going to go Terrence Mann. Norm Powell, you can get 25, 30 minutes. I think Norm Powell at 4.4 is an okay value. You just need him to, get going as a scorer. He really hasn't done that so far in this series, but he's certainly capable. If Kawhi is out, he'd be probably a core play for me. But with Kawhi in, that would keep his ownership a little bit in check and kind of makes me a little bit more interested, to be honest. Because then if Kawhi was out, you'd be getting to the situation where Powell would be like really chalky, and then you're like, oh, do I want chalky Powell who does nothing but score? And then if he doesn't score, then he's just going to be like fucking Gary Harris. Gary Harris. Yeah, I mean, Gary Harris, what did I say about these guys who all they do is score? Gary Harris, terrible game 1. Game 2, I was like, nah, I'm not going to eat that chalk. Crushes. Game 3, I was like, okay, fine, I'll play Gary Harris. Ass again. Just classic. But yeah, that does it for the Clippers. Over on the Mavs side, obviously you got Luka. He has not really gone full Luka yet in this series, which makes me think on one hand, is LA's defense kind of like keeping him from doing everything we usually see him do in the regular season, or is he just destined to finally blow up at home in game 3? Very worried about fading him, but it's a 3-game slate and he's coming in at 46% ownership. I will note he has a 50% boom rating. He's in the optimal lineup 47% of the time, and he's projected for nearly 70 fantasy points. So if I'm doing a lot of lineups, you better believe I'm playing Luka a good amount. If I'm doing one main lineup, I might end up fading him just because you get instant leverage on the field if Luka does not crush. If Luka goes and gets like 60 fantasy points, that's a win for me at that price. So if you're going to pay for him, he needs to go get like 70 plus for sure. That said, Luka looks great. I'm not going to say a bad thing about Luka. He's just expensive and really highly owned. That's the only downside. Kyrie Irving looks really nicely priced at 8.4K. He's been really good in this series. In game 1, he had 50 fantasy points. In game 2, he had 41. He's going to get all the minutes. He's going to have good usage. He just is going to defer to Luka a little bit, so he doesn't exhibit quite the ceiling. He does feel like a pretty good leverage play, though, with all this ownership going towards Luka. So Kyrie at a severely discounted price by comparison looks pretty good. Daniel Gafford's questionable. If he's out, Derek Lively would be a pretty good value at 4.3. I feel a little bit better about PJ Washington at 5.6 just because his minutes are pretty solidified. He has played 37, 35 minutes in the first 2 games. He's been playing well, 26 and 32 fantasy points. He needs to score to really pan out as a DFS play, but he's been doing that, and he's certainly capable of continuing to do that. So I like him just fine at 5.6. Not like a core play for me, but I do like him a decent amount. You could end up looking at Derek Jones and Maxi Kleba if Gafford is out as well, but I probably won't be diving that deep. Derek Jones is actually coming up to be really chalky at 3.6K. He did play 32 minutes in game 2. So actually, if that's going to continue, we do need to consider him at 3.6. It does feel very Mo Wagner-ish, though. Mo Wagner was the same price and very chalky yesterday and did not do well. So, Derek Jones, it's all about minutes and savings. If he's going to be playing 32 minutes again, then sure, at 3.6, we can take that shot. If we can't feel confident about that, then that's bad chalk. All right, last game tonight, we got Minnesota and the Suns. Minnesota's up 2-0 in this series. The Suns don't look very good. There's no denying that. It's not a good matchup. The only positive is the series does shift to Phoenix. So I would give the Suns a chance here. I wouldn't be shocked if they win the game and actually make it a series at this point. But who fucking knows? On the Minnesota side, this matchup has not been that difficult for the Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards grades as a really good option at 9K flat. Not a really good boom rating, but he's not owned, and he has a decent projection. I have no problem with Anthony Edwards. He's just not a core play for me. Rudy could totally be a core play. Excuse me. It's not stop talking, man. It gets that tickle in the throat going. Rudy looks good, almost 40 points for his fantasy projection. Still too cheap. Love Rudy. 24% boom rating. He's going to be owned, but I think that's fine. The only issue is I like a lot of the different centers. Brook Lopez, Zubac, Miles Turner. I just don't know if you need to put him in. I do like him quite a bit, but I probably will be saving at center today. Cat looks fine at 7.1. Pretty good leverage play on seemingly chalky Rudy. Mike Conley at 5.5 is just okay. Not really a priority for me. The guy I really like is Jaden McDaniels again. He smashed at 4.1K in the previous slate that I talked about him, and I loved him. He was awesome. I don't think he's going to score 26 real points again, but he's still too cheap for a guy who's going to play 35-plus minutes. I'll just take that risk. But yeah, it does it for Minnesota. Not like super excited to get to Minnesota here. I think they're probably due for a down game here on the road in game 3. So I'd probably just go for the value with McDaniels, and for the most part, stay away. Maybe Rudy would be my second play there. I actually like the Suns tonight. Famous last words, I know. But here's the deal. Devin Booker, he's been held in check the first 2 games. Game 3, at home, crucial. They have to win. The guy is going to get it going at some point in the series. He just has to. And he's too cheap now. He's at 8.1K. He is carrying a little bit of ownership at 22%. So clearly I'm not the only one who's thinking like that. He does have a nice 26% boom rating. The projection isn't like crazy good. Halliburton projects better. Anthony Edwards projects better. Dame projects better. Siakam projects better. So I am curious if this ownership starts dipping at some point, just because the projection does not align with like what with the slate and like with what some of these other guys look like. I think it's okay at 22% to kind of bite down on that logic of like he's due, he's too cheap, he should get it going. So I do still like Devin quite a bit. I hope he's a little bit lower owned when we get closer to lock. But yeah, I like him a lot. I do want to play him if I can. I will say Kevin Durant looks just as good. He's only $100 more. He projects 1 less fantasy point, and he's like coming at like half the ownership. So I like KD quite a bit too. I think Booker's kind of due. Bradley Beal grades out as like the best points per dollar play for the Suns. He's only 6.4K. He's got a decent projection. He is going to be chalky at 27%. So my strategy going in before I saw the ownership was kind of like, okay, screw Brad Beal if he's going to be owned, and go play Devin. So I hopefully we can update this and see that Booker is not going to be that owned. But you just have to make those decisions later on when we know, like when we have a better idea of what projections and ownership are going to look like. Nurkic at 6'2" is a fine play, although not really a priority for me. But like I said, again, another decent center. A lot of good, decent mid-range centers tonight. Grayson Allen is questionable at 5K flat. If he plays, he's okay. If he's out, Eric Gordon at 4K flat would be interesting, and Royce O'Neal at 4.3 is also viable. All right, that's going to do it for me for this 3-game breakdown. You got to make these decisions early today because the first game's at 4:30. It's weird, but that's where we are. Me personally, I'm building around Dame. I'm building around the Bucks Pacers game for the most part. Probably going to be underweight on Luka. So if you don't like my calls lately and you think I'm wrong, go lock Luka 100% in and win all the money, I guess. But hopefully my insight here helps you out. You know, I also like Booker too, so I'm probably going to try to build something with Dame, Booker, maybe Halliburton, and then get the cheap guys like Bev and Nesmith in that game, and then go get maybe I might end up eating a Derrick Jones chalk just to get the savings. But a lot of like the chalky value I probably will be pretty interested in, and the way I'll get different is getting away from Luka and maybe getting away from what was Siakam's ownership. Yeah, Siakam is the chalkiest pacer, so probably getting away from Siakam and Luka, and hopefully that works out for me. But like I said, a lot of really good plays on this slate. The mid-range looks awesome. It's up to you to make those calls. But hopefully it helped you out. If I did, please give this video a like and also consider subscribing to the channel so you can get more videos just like this. Thanks and good luck.